scientific form. So I want to talk about how this evolution happened, and we'll mostly be looking at the science part. Okay. So first, to get the syntax in place. So a lot of cryptography, at least until the 1970s, was all symmetric key cryptography, or sometimes also called secret key cryptography. Conveniently, both are SKE. So just to make things formal, so there's a key space K, the message space M, and there are two algorithms. There's encrypt and decrypt. Encrypt takes a secret key and a message and produces a ciphertext. Decrypt takes a secret key and a ciphertext and produces, decrypt takes a secret key, ciphertext produces a message, or produces this special symbol bot, which denotes that decryption failed. Okay. So this is going to be a syntax. This symbol denotes that decryption failed. Otherwise, there are these two algorithms, encrypt and decrypt, and these work with a key space K and a message space M. Okay. Now, yeah. So what correctness would you expect from a symmetric key encryption scheme? So the correctness property is, if I encrypt a message M using a key K, and I decrypt using the same key K, then I should get back the message M. Okay? Make sense? Yeah? Now the question is, how did people use symmetric key encryption? The toy scenario was, there's one party, let's call her Alice, and there's one party called Bob. Both share a common secret key. And now whenever Alice wants to send some message to Bob, she will first encrypt using the secret key K. This is the ciphertext. She sends over the ciphertext. Bob receives the ciphertext, uses the decryption algorithm to recover the message. And the hope is that whichever adversary, if the adversary is monitoring the channel, the adversary doesn't learn anything from just looking at the ciphertext. Okay. What does it mean? What does it mean? How do we formally capture that the adversary doesn't learn anything? We'll make this more formal. Okay. But for now, just let's work with this informal definition of secret key encryption. Okay. And I'll just write down the syntax, because later in the lecture we'll see public key encryption, so that it's easier to distinguish between the two. Wow, this works. So there's a key space K, there's a message space M. There are two algorithms, encrypt and decrypt. Encrypt takes a key, a message produces a ciphertext. Decrypt takes a key, a ciphertext produces a message or bot. And correctness says that for all keys and for all messages, the decryption of a ciphertext produced by encrypting M should give you back M. Okay. So far, we have not talked about security. We'll formalize that towards the end of today's lecture. Okay. All right. So one of the earliest schemes was the scheme called Caesar's cipher. Here, a secret key is and again, throughout this lecture, I'll only be working with the English alphabet. So the secret key is an integer S, and to encrypt, you shift each character forward by S positions. Okay. So for instance, if the secret key was, let's say, 2, and if your text was BAD, then that becomes DCF. Okay. How do you decrypt? Just go. Both the parties know the secret key, so you just go back by S characters. Okay, and you go around towards the ends. Okay. This is not secure. Why?
Common words like is, can be easily decrypted.
Sorry?
Common words like is, can be decrypted. Like you can know the secret position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. So you would see the ciphertext corresponding to is, and you can figure out maybe that this corresponds to is, and then guess the secret key. Okay. And also, I mean, there's a even easier attack. If you have sufficiently long text, You just do a brute force attack, try out all possible values of S. With very high probability, only one of them will make sense as English text. Everything else would be gibberish. Yeah, Sira.
That would be if you know that the encryption algorithm is like shifting it forward by a certain number of letters and then you apply for 26 values of S. But it could be some other algorithm at random.
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect question. I'll just repeat it for the recording. So the question was, okay, this attack assumes that the adversary knows that we are using Caesar's cipher scheme, right? And this is an assumption that we're going to make throughout this course. This is called Kirchhoff's principle. The idea is the only thing that we can hope to hide from the adversary is the secret key. We cannot hope to hide the algorithms or the schemes that we are using. Okay? So the adversary in this particular case, for instance, we do not hope to hide the key space K, the message space M, the encryption algorithm, or the decryption algorithms. So what the adversary certainly knows is the key space, the message space, and the description of the two algorithms. Okay. What it does not know, the security should come only from the key being hidden. Okay? Yeah? Other questions? Is that clear? Okay, so we'll not be aiming for security via obscurity. We'll assume that the adversary knows all these algorithms. The only thing that we hope that the adversary does not know is the secret key. And all the security should come from the fact that the adversary does not know the secret key. Okay? All right. So a few years later, so there was something called the substitution cipher. Here, the secret key is a permutation over the alphabet. So if the alphabet is your characters A to Z, the secret key is some permutation that maps these letters to some other letters. Okay? And to encrypt, you would substitute each character according to the permutation. Okay? So for instance, as an example, so let's say this was our permutation, A maps to M, B maps to U, C maps to X, then BED gets mapped to URG. Okay? So what is the key space over here? Yeah, so how many permutations? 26 factorial. How big is 26 factorial? Is it bigger than 10 to the 26 or smaller? Yeah, so the key space, at least in this case, a brute force attack will not work. Is there some other attack that's possible? Yeah.
Frequency attacks.
Yeah, so what is the frequency attack?
Like the letter E comes like most of the times in the English vocabulary. So like we can find out which letter is coming most of the time. So E is mapped to that letter and so on for that.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is called frequency analysis. So the idea is in the English text, E is the most common letter. So if you look at your cipher text, you look for the most common letter and try to guess that, okay, maybe E is mapping to this letter, or maybe have a small set of guesses, and very soon you'll be able to narrow down on the secret key. Okay. So yeah, so this was a scheme where even though your key space was large, this is a broken cipher. In the 1500s, someone proposed a related encryption scheme. Pardon my French, but the name of the scheme was essentially the indecipherable cipher. And the idea was instead of taking one permutation, you work with 100 permutations. Okay? And the ith character, you use the ith permutation. Okay? Do you think this is secure? Do you think this is an indecipherable cipher?
Here, can't we just do the same analysis for the first 100?
Exactly, yeah. So you can do the same frequency analysis even over here. except what you would do is you look at your text and let's say you look at the first character, 100 first character, 200 first character, and so on. And then you can do the same attack. So yeah, surprisingly, this scheme stood for around 300 years. And what we have essentially seen is if you have an efficient algorithm for breaking the substitution cipher, you would get an efficient algorithm for breaking, it's called Vigenere's cipher, even though Vigenere is not the person who came up with this. He was a French diplomat who spent some time in Italy and studying crypto at that time, and somehow his name got associated with this cipher. Okay. All right. So this brings us to, moving on, so this brings us to what are called rotor machines. Has anyone heard of these things? In what context? Yeah, so these were used by the Axis forces in the Second World War. And again, these are similar to Vigenere's cipher, and these were ultimately broken by the Allied forces. Who is this? That's not Alan Turing. This is Alan Turing. Yeah, so the Allied forces broke the scheme, and yeah, so this cat and mouse thing has been going on for centuries. And towards the end of the Second World War, people started asking, okay, this can't go on forever. What we want is some sort of provable guarantees. Okay, so I want an encryption scheme where I can prove that no one can break this encryption scheme. Okay, and such a scheme was proposed in the late 1940s by Claude Shannon. What is Shannon famous for?
Information, the paper on.
Yeah. So one of his prime contributions were his contributions to information theory and error correction. But another landmark paper of his is this paper titled Communication Theory of Secrecy Systems. And in this, he introduced this way of encrypting called the one-time pad. And he also proved that this is perfectly secure. Okay. And this is not very surprising. We'll see the scheme today. Of course, there's a price that you pay for perfection. The price is one-time pad. As the name suggests, you get security only for sending your ciphertext once. Okay. So again, we'll formalize this later in today's lecture. And the second limitation is if you want perfect secrecy, the size of your key must be as large as the size of the message that you're encrypting. Okay. Clearly, these things make the one-time pad very impractical if you want to use the one-time pad directly. But this is a useful building block in cryptography. Okay. Any questions on the one-time pad? Clear, everyone? Okay. So then we moved on. So this cannot be used in practice. So people started asking, okay, one-time pad is great. This gives us perfect security. That means security against all kinds of adversaries. But it's very impractical. Do we really need security against all kinds of adversaries is what people started asking. And the consensus was, okay, you don't really need security against all kinds of adversaries. We only need security against adversaries that are polynomial time or efficient, basically security against efficient computation. Okay. So that brings us to, something called, in the 1970s, people started standardizing encryption schemes. So prior to the 1970s, what was happening was every group had their own sort of encryption standards, encryption schemes. What the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, I think back then it was called the NBS in the US, they came up with a scheme together with collaboration with IBM, and this is called the data encryption standard. So what this scheme gives us, this tells us that the key space, they gave some scheme. The key space was 0, 1 to the 56, which is 56 bits. Each key was 56 bits long. And then they gave two algorithms, DES and DES inverse. DES is used to encrypt, DES inverse is used to decrypt. And yeah, the message size was 64 bits long. Okay. And yeah, so what guarantees do you think these algorithms had? I mean, what correctness guarantees did they have? What do you expect DES and DES inverse to do?
Correctness should hold.
Yeah, so correctness should hold. So in particular, So the adversary in this case knows the algorithms DES and DES inverse. And from correctness, we know that for all k in the key space, for all messages in the message space, if I apply DES inverse on this should give us back n. Okay? Yeah? All right. So this was DES. And even though this is still a heuristic, the important thing here is because this became a standard, this attracted the attention of a lot of cryptanalysts. A lot of people tried to break this, and this led to a lot of discovery of new cryptanalytic techniques. And currently, the best known attack takes around 2 to the 44 steps. So this is feasible using modern supercomputers, and therefore DES was gradually phased out in the 1990s. Okay. So before we move on, I have a question for you all. So this DES, as I've written, the message space is 64 bits long. How do you encrypt? If you had to encrypt 128 bits, what would you do? Is the question clear? So NIST has given us this data encryption standard, but this can by itself handle only 64 bits. Suppose I want to encrypt 128 bits. How do we do it? Encrypt them separately. Okay, so I want some proposals over here. So one proposal is so the question is, how to use DES to encrypt 128-bit messages. Let's say your message was M1, M2, where each MI belongs to 01 to the 64. So one proposal is you take this. Do you take the same key or do you take different keys? Huh? Sorry? Can do both. What is your proposal? Same is fine. Okay. So one proposal is so this is going to be our new ciphertext. Okay. Any other proposals? Anything else that we could do? Yes.
I would say we can do different keys because, like, if we find the key of the first 64 bits, like we will directly find the rest of the part, right? We need to scale it equally. So if the bits also increase, we need to make the time increase as well. So I said would.
Okay. So the proposal one, the objection to this scheme is if you use this scheme and if someone can figure out this key, then they can also decrypt this part, right? But we assume that DES is secure. 2 to the 44. Let's assume we don't have a supercomputer. 2 to the 44 is expensive for us. So then we cannot find the key K. Okay. So maybe that attack would not work. Any other proposals or any other objections to this scheme? Yeah.
Increase the key size.
Increase the key size to what?
Above 56.
Okay, good. Yeah. So one of the objections to DES was the key size is too short, and eventually they increased it to 128 bits. But for now, again, let's assume that 2 to the 44 is very expensive for us. So my question is, can we use DES to encrypt 128-bit messages? Okay. And of course, I'm cheating over here. I've not even told you what it means to encrypt. What is a security definition for encrypt? But let's work with an informal understanding that encryption hides the underlying message. Is there something about the message that you can learn by just looking at the ciphertext over there?
The length of the message is the same.
Good. Yeah. So the length of the message is the same. So you learn the length of the message. So I'll address this a bit later in the lecture. We'll not try to hide the length of the message. The length of the message is something that we cannot hope to hide. Okay. But yeah, it's a good point. But That is something that we can never hide. Okay. What else can we learn? Can we learn something about M1 and M2 by just looking at the ciphertext?
If the two ciphertext chunks are the same, we know that it's the same.
Exactly, yeah. So note that in the scheme that's given over here, just by looking at the ciphertext, I can figure out that M1 is equal to M2. Right? Yeah? That's because DES and DES inverse, these are two deterministic algorithms. So once you know the algorithms, you know that these are deterministic. So if you look at DES of k comma M1, if that's the same as DES of k comma M2, then you know for sure that M1 was equal to M2. Okay? So this is some information that you did not have until you saw the ciphertext, but the moment you see the ciphertext, you know that either M1 is equal to M2 or you can be sure that M1 is not equal to M2. Okay? So what that tells us is even though DES requires 2 to the 44 time to break, we didn't require 2 to the 44 steps to figure out whether M1 was equal to M2 or not. Okay? So we need to be careful, even though the building block is secure, we need to be careful on how we use these building blocks. Okay. Any other proposals? Could we do something else? Okay, good. So I'll come to that. Why is that a threat? I'll come to that. For now, just believe me that if the adversary can learn something new by looking at the ciphertext, then that's something that we need to be careful about. Okay. Yeah, other questions?
So here again we assume that the adversary knows that the first term corresponds to the first solution.
Yeah, again, so that is part of our encryption algorithm, right? So that is part of Sirath's algorithm was you take the first block, encrypt it using DES, you take the second block, encrypt it using DES, put them one after the other, right? So this is part of our way of using DES, and the adversary, we assume that the adversary knows this. Okay. Is everyone convinced that you can learn at least something from that ciphertext? Any other proposals on how to encrypt 128-bit messages? You could keep changing the keys, right? You could use different keys, then that takes care of, at least you don't have this attack. The problem is then your key size grows with the message size. Okay.
We could use let's say we use first 56 bits of DSK command as the key for the next one.
Okay, good. Yeah, right. So for instance, a different scheme could be to encrypt M1, M2, you first compute DES of k comma M1. Let's call this CT1. And then you use the first 56 bits of CT1, use that to encrypt M2. Okay. And now my final scheme is CT1 and CT2. Okay. Is this secure? Why is this not secure? Yeah, the attacker knows CT1. Okay, and once you know CT1, you can truncate you can remove the last 8 bits, and then that gives you the key for this part. Now the adversary also knows DES inverse. It will apply DES inverse with this key. Okay, but good. Yeah, these are very good proposals. Anything else that we could do?
Just 128 bits into a pair of 64.
Compress the 128-bit message. How do we compress? Okay. And then you encrypt both those blocks. But you would, okay, yeah, we can take this proposal offline, but my claim is you would still learn something about M1 and M2 even in that case. Any other proposals?
Can't we just shift the key, like rotate, like the first bit becomes the second bit and so on? Just
Yeah. So these two schemes, you can learn something about M1 and M2. But here's a third proposal. Maybe what you could do is, let's take DES K comma M1. This is CT1. And for the second one, instead, I could, let's say, either rotate the key or let's say I flip all bits of the key. Okay? So this is similar in spirit to what you suggested. So the first two were broken, but the third one may or may not be secure. Okay? So the moral of this entire exercise is even though your building blocks can be secure, how you use them to build your final encryption scheme could be non-trivial. Make sense? All right. Yes. So DES was eventually phased out because the key was too short. So the next proposal, again, this was the next standard. This was the advanced encryption scheme. This came in the 1990s. Similar in spirit, except now your key size is much bigger. The correctness guarantees are same as before. Here, the best known attacks, so far, the best known attack is 2 to the 126 steps. And this is the most widely used cryptographic algorithm today. I think more than 90% of the internet traffic is AES ciphertext. Okay? Yeah. All right. So this was a brief timeline of private key encryption. I want to quickly show you the AES circuit. The AES circuit looks something like this. It's not important to understand what exactly this is doing, but the way it works is you take the key, you expand the key into multiple keys K1, K2, and Kn, and then what you do is the first key K1, you XOR that with the input, apply something called these fancy S boxes. These are some circuits that apply on 16 bits and produce a 16-bit output. Okay, so you have 8 of these blocks, and then you scramble up the outputs, again XOR it with a new key, repeat the same process. So in AES, you do it 10 times. If your input was longer, you do it for more rounds. So this thing is called one round of AES. This is called the substitution layer. This is called the permutation layer. The structure is not important. What I wanted to highlight over here is, if you had to come up with a symmetric key or a private key encryption scheme, it's not very difficult. Okay? If I asked you all to come up with a candidate, there's a very good chance you all will be able to come up with candidates which at least I won't be able to break for days. Okay. So symmetric key, private key, crypto, this has been around for centuries, and now we have very good candidates. However, in the 70s, so I'll talk about this later. In the 70s, people started asking, okay, symmetric key crypto is great, we have good candidates, but what is the one major limitation of symmetric key crypto?
both players need to know the key.
Yeah, so both parties need to know the key. And for a lot of e-commerce applications, both parties may not share a key before they start communicating. Okay? For instance, let's say you want to buy something on Amazon. How do you share a key with Amazon without meeting? And this was addressed in 1976 by Diffie and Hellman. They gave a protocol for exchanging keys, and then shortly thereafter, Rivest, Shamir, and Adelman, they gave the first public key encryption scheme. This was in 1977. Okay. And these breakthroughs, even though these were both these teams got the Turing Awards. I don't remember which year, but both these groups got the Turing Award, and these were major breakthroughs. But the point that I want to make is that these breakthroughs happened because there was a lot of progress in theoretical CS in the previous 2 decades. So the central idea of modern crypto is to base security on the hardness of computational problems. Okay? So what you want to do is you want to build an encryption scheme or any crypto scheme such that if someone comes up with an attack on this scheme, then you're guaranteed to find an efficient algorithm for a hard problem. Have you all seen this this process anywhere? NP hardness, right? So what happens in how do you prove NP hardness?
Basically, we reduce the problem into an
NP complete.
Yeah, so you reduce it to an NP complete problem, right? Yeah, so this is a landmark idea, right? So in the 60s and the 70s, CS started looking at computational problems, and we started classifying problems as easy or hard. Easy means you have an efficient polynomial time algorithm, and hard were the ones for which you could show NP completeness results. Okay, and even for crypto, we'll be doing exactly the same thing. We'll find a computational problem. We'll build our crypto system, and then we'll prove that if someone can break the crypto system, then we have an efficient algorithm for this computation problem. Make sense? So what would be a dream problem for a hard problem? So if you had the choice to use whatever hard problem is out there, which one would you want to use? Why factoring? Is factoring NP complete? Factoring is not NP complete. Which problem would you like to use? Order finding. Okay, you're already way ahead, huh? So what I was so if you've taken a TOC or an algorithms course, we are told that the hardest problems out there are these NP complete problems. So natural question is, can we use these NP complete problems to build crypto? Unfortunately, at this point we don't know how to base crypto security on the hardness of NP complete problems. But rather we use these factoring or order finding problems. And so the impact of Diffie-Hellman and key exchange goes beyond just public key encryption. What these works gave us is they gave us useful cryptographic assumptions, which are useful not only for public key encryption but for much more. Okay. In fact, you'll see this in your assignments. So this is all I had to talk about as far as public key encryption goes. Going beyond encryption, so your assignments will be on something called zero knowledge proofs. So the basic idea is I want to convince you that I know a solution to a puzzle, but I don't want to give you the solution. How can we do this if we are allowed interaction? So on the surface, this should look very magical or unbelievable. How can I convince you that I know the answer without giving you the answer? But this is something that zero knowledge proofs allow you to do, and this is what you'll see in your course assignments. Okay. All right. Any questions so far? So this was a brief history of crypto, starting from BC to today. Any questions before we move on?
How are you trying to link NP hardness here? I did not understand.
Okay. Yeah. So over here. Right. So my point was, so we know that NP hard problems are the hardest of computational problems. Now it would be great if I can build a public key encryption scheme where I can give you the guarantee that if an adversary breaks the public key encryption scheme, then I have an efficient algorithm for an NP hard problem. Okay, that would be amazing, right? Because people have been working on NP hard problems for decades now. Unfortunately, we don't know how to show this, and I'll talk more about this in one of the later lectures. What we know how to show is how to build public key crypto using moderately hard computational problems such as factoring. So factoring is not NP complete, it's NP intermediate, but it has the nice structure that it is computationally hard, and at the same time it's useful for cryptography. Okay? Questions? Clear? Any questions so far? All right. Yeah. So now at this point, I can tell you finally what this course is going to be about. So before that, so in the 90s, 80s and 90s were a golden age for theoretical cryptography. We had formal definitions for all basic crypto primitives. We had various constructions, proofs of security. So in some sense, this gave us a detailed manual for each primitive. So if you want public key encryption, this should be your definition. This is how you construct. This is going to be a proof of security. Okay. So all that was left to do was to use these theoretical results and implement them for real-world security problems. Okay. So if you want a protocol to communicate with your Wi-Fi router, what building blocks should you use? This is all that was left to do. Okay. Unfortunately, even though in the 90s were a golden age for theoretical crypto, it was this was the dark ages for practical crypto. And the problem was, even though there were these instruction manuals, when they were implemented, there were a lot of mistakes in how they were implemented. For instance, if the manual said that the key must not be the key must be used only once, people ended up reusing the key. Similarly, another common mistake was that the manual said, okay, you need to sample prime numbers from a certain distribution. Implementers went ahead and sampled from some other distribution. Or building blocks were composed incorrectly. For instance, we had DES and AES, and even now, a lot of encryption uses this sort of encryption where you encrypt each chunk separately using the same key. We know that this is not secure, but still, unfortunately, this was very common in the 90s. So the objective of this course is I don't want you to make these mistakes. So I want you to understand what are the cryptographic building blocks out there. And if you have a new problem at hand, how do you come up with a solution and how do you prove security? Okay. So in this course, so we will see a few crypto algorithms, but they will not be the focus of the course. For instance, we'll not see the implementation of the AES circuit. What I'm more interested in is what abstract properties does this AES circuit have? How do we use the AES circuit for building crypto, for building private key crypto? Okay. Similarly, for instance, when we talk about RSA, you need to be very careful about how you sample the primes that are used for RSA. But again, we'll not worry about it. We'll assume there's some distribution sitting somewhere. We know it's written in some manual, and we'll just understand how to use RSA for cryptographic problems. Okay. And one more thing that I want to highlight over here is, many of you would end up, hopefully some of you would end up working in crypto companies or crypto research labs. Please never implement any of these primitives by yourself. Even if you feel you understand all the implementation, please don't. Use existing libraries. There are reasons for that because there are attacks that go far beyond what we'll see in this course. Okay? And a naive implementation may be subject to those attacks. Okay. Yeah, so the real objective of this course is I want you to be able to build your own crypto systems using existing crypto blocks. You should be able to come up with formal security definitions and security proofs. Okay. Now, what does it mean to come up with a formal security definition? So this is a theoretical course. So hopefully you all know by now. So what does it mean to come up with a security definition? So the first thing important, one of the most important steps, is to define what it means for a primitive to be secure. And we'll do this today for symmetric key encryption. Next, you figure out what are the underlying required building blocks. You propose a construction and you prove that your construction satisfies the security definition. Okay. Again, we'll see examples of this, then this recipe will be more clear. A nice analogy was given by Mihir Belare. It's the Lego analogy. Anyone played with Lego blocks? Okay, so you have these Lego blocks, and the nice thing is you can build fancy structures using these blocks, but there's only very specific ways in which you can combine these blocks. Okay, And in crypto, it's very similar. You have these atomic building blocks, okay, and this is only limited ways in which you can combine them. Okay. Yeah, just like Lego blocks are immutable, you're not allowed to modify the building blocks of your crypto primitives. And secondly, you can't manufacture your own Lego blocks. And similarly, I don't want you to implement code for the building blocks. Use the existing libraries. Okay? Make sense? All right. So we have 15 minutes to go.